joining us. We're going to get started in a couple minutes, just to let last few people come in, and then we'll get started. We are going to record this presentation and live stream, but once we get to the discussion part and questions, we're going to turn off the recording so that people can feel free to ask questions that may not be wanting to be live streamed or recorded. So we'll do that, during the question and comments part. So we'll wait a couple more minutes and then we'll get started. Wait maybe one more minute and then I'll get started, just to let a couple more people come in. Okay, so maybe I'll just get started now, just so that we don't run out of time and that we have ample time for discussion and questions as well. So thank you so much for joining us. My name is Eduardo Huesca and I'm a project manager with OCAL. And for this presentation, I'm going to be joined by Melissa Stratham, one of our ergonomists from our OCAL Windsor Clinic, as well as Andrew Flanagan, our ergonomist from our OCAL Sarnia Clinic, as well as Krija Pelago, Andrea Steele, Aswani Kano, and Cassini Malikan, who are members of our Teamwork Project Temporary Foreign Worker Outreach Team, who will be jumping in and sharing some of their experience in the development of our new MSD infographic for agricultural workers. So thanks again for joining us, and we're excited to tell you a bit more about this new infographic and how it can be used with and by workers as well as by employers in terms of their health and safety education with workers as well. So just to start off, I will go over the plan for today. So I'm going to talk really briefly about OCAL's work with Ontario Migrant Temporary Foreign Agriculture Workers. And then we've divided the presentation into two segments. One is understanding the issue. So then we'll have Andrew talk a little bit about or give us an introduction to ergonomics and musculoskeletal disorders. And Melissa's then going to give us an intro to ergonomic hazards in agricultural work. And then we're going to talk a little bit about MSDs among Ontario migrant temporary foreign agriculture workers, as well as the gap that we encountered in terms of prevention education on this issue and resources that are accessible to migrant workers. And that it was that gap that kind of really pushed us to try to create something ourselves. Then we're going to focus in on the infographic itself, talk about really highlighting the innovative collaboration between our ergonomists and our outreach teams that really created this great resource, contributing both a strong kind of understanding of ergonomics with our strong understanding of this worker population. We're going to review the infographic. We're also going to review an accompanying new worker warm-up wallet card, a little bit of a tongue twister, but a warm-up card that we've produced as well that can be distributed alongside the infographic to show workers some warm-up exercises that they can do. And then we're going to also be talking, and then we're going to talk about how these resources can be used with Ontario migrant temporary foreign workers and their employers. We're going to then close off with a bit of a highlight on our Where Does It Hurt body mapping workshop that we've been doing for the last 2 years, which is another great example of how we can work with migrant workers to better understand aches and pains that they have, as well as what type of work they're doing, and try to make those connections and figure out maybe recommendations for solutions. And then we'll open it up for discussions and questions. So that's the plan. So I'll get started a little bit with the brief history of our work with Ontario migrant agriculture workers. So OCAL, we started working with these worker communities in 2006 with a small team of staff at OCAL. Our engagement with migrant workers was both clinical in the sense that we ran parachute occupational clinics in various communities where workers are arriving to work. And this then looked like our occupational health physicians and nurses seeing these workers as patients. So it gave us an opportunity to understand some health issues and really try to look at the work relatedness of what we were seeing clinically. And then during this time, then we'd engage in prevention-based education with workers, both at the community level as well as the workplace level. So we were invited to farms by employers to present to workers at that level, and we collaborated with a lot of community groups to then present our workshops in the community. During this time, this work was funded completely by the Prevention Office of the Ministry of Labor, or MLITSD. Now, more presently, we started receiving, or in 2020, we started receiving federal funding, and initially it was through the COVID kind of response funding for migrant agriculture workers. And now more currently, we receive this federal funding through 2 projects, our Teamwork project that's directed by Workforce Windsor-Essex and the Windsor-Essex Local Immigration Partnership, as well as then another project through the TNO, the Neighborhood Organizations WSS project. And both of these are funded by ESDC, their migrant worker support program. So this federal funding has allowed us to hire outreach teams, which really has been, just a pleasure for us in terms of enabling us to be better connected to communities. And so this is our Teamwork outreach team who are with us today and who are going to be jumping into the conversation in a little bit. Prija, Andrea, Swanee, Cassini, and Toe have a lot of experience working with migrant agriculture workers and themselves represent the cultural communities of these workers. So their ability to not only get our resources out to workers, but have workers also let us know about our resources, and then through their insight and connection to workers also inform the creation of our resources, which is the case with this MSD infographic as well. So through our outreach teams, we're able to then really be on the ground in the community, distributing resources, presenting information directly to workers. This is our other team, our TNO outreach team that focuses on, so the Teamwork team is Western Region, Windsor-Essex, Sarnia, Lambton, Chatham-Kent, and our TNO team focuses on the community of Niagara, Simcoe, Ontario, Belleville, Cobourg, and Prince Edward County as well. And similarly, they're on the ground presenting our information to workers in those regions as well. So now I will hand it off to Andrew, who's going to give us a bit of introduction to ergonomics and MSDs.
All right, hi everyone. So I'll jump right into this. So when we speak about ergonomics, what we're talking about is matching the job design equipment to the worker from a physical, cognitive, psychosocial standpoint. And that's often thought of as working smarter, not harder, is a term that you hear quite a bit. Okay. Sorry, next slide. And so when we speak about ergonomics, what we're trying to do is we're implementing solutions generally to control musculoskeletal disorders, to prevent musculoskeletal disorders. So MSDs are injuries to the soft tissues of our body, so our joints, muscles, nerves, and the discs that are in our spine. Okay. And we're going to get into these in greater detail in the coming slides, but these are the hazards that contribute to the development of MSDs. So we'll go through force, awkward postures, repetition, vibration, contact stress, and you'll see each of these risk factors later on the handout as well. Okay. So the first risk factor that I would discuss is force. And there's two types of force that we can speak about. There are external forces. These are forces that are applied to our body by outside objects. So you can see the photo below. This worker is bent over to pick up a bin of tomatoes. That would be an example of an outside force or an external force. And then we have internal forces. Internal forces are generated by our body's own needs to support itself. So if you think about the force demands that it takes just to hold your arm straight out to the side for a long period of time, even with no weight in your hand or force on your hand, eventually the muscles in your shoulder will fatigue. That's an example of an internal force. Okay, Edward? And next we can look at repetition. So repetition, typically when we think of repetition, we think of someone working on an assembly line, doing very, very repetitive work over and over and over again. But when we think about repetition, really what we should think about is doing a repeated task without allowing the body sufficient time for it to recover. So the greater amount of time that we're performing repetitions, the longer we're going to be performing repetitions, the longer it's going to take us to recover from them. And there are a number of factors that play in there as well. But we'll speak to kind of the synergy of risk factors later on down the road. So greater repetitions require greater rest time. A way that we can think about repetition as well is if you look at this top line, the tissue tolerance line, you can see that it starts quite high above the margin of safety. And the little squiggly line in the bottom there. So as each bump we see along the x-axis, the line that's going up and down, that would represent one lift. So if we think about this person maybe doing a bicep curl, every time the line rises up closer to that tissue tolerance line, that would represent one lift. And then we put the weight down and rest, and the tissue tolerance recovers. So when we rest, the tissues recover. As we're lifting or performing these repetitive motions, the tissue tolerance declines. And if we were to keep lifting over and over and over again, eventually that tissue tolerance line, if we didn't rest, would get lower and lower down to where the point where injury would occur. Okay. The next risk factor that we'd speak about is awkward posture. So awkward postures include each of the three things that we can see in the photos below here. So twisting, these are just examples, twisting, reaching too far, bending over to reach low. We could look at reaching up high, really anything that is straying away from our body's neutral posture. We have static postures, so these occur when a posture is held for too long. And when we're holding a posture for a sustained period of time, as you can see in this little graphic on the right here, if it's not too small for you to read, when we're resting, our blood flow demands are low, and our blood and the amount of blood that our body provides is low as a result. When we're performing a dynamic effort, so like running, for example, like you can see in the picture, the blood needed to deliver oxygen to our body's tissues is high, and our body responds by sending more blood to those tissues when we're moving. But when we're performing a static effort, so if we're just standing there holding a weight, or if we're just standing, you can see the picture, the person sorting tomatoes there. They're just standing there with their hands kind of sustained. And although they may be moving their hands a little bit to sort these tomatoes, their shoulders are kind of in a hunched position, and they're maintaining this posture for long periods of time. So the blood needed to in maybe this worker's shoulders is high, but the blood being sent because they're not moving is low. So sustained postures can lead to the development of MSDs. It's not just always high movement dynamic efforts. Okay.
I'm going to jump in here, Melissa here. So the next risk factor is contact stress. So that's any stress on the tissues of the body, usually from a hard object or a hard edge of a surface. You see the diagram here with different tools. When the tool handle digs into the palm and it's not long enough, that is one area of contact stress, as well as kneeling. So it's that direct pressure on the underlying tendons and nerves, and it results in reduced blood flow. So, reduced blood flow to the upper extremities is what would happen with the contact stress on the palm. And conversely, when you're kneeling on something hard, that's going to reduce blood flow to your lower extremities. Vibration is the next hazard, and vibration comes in two forms. It comes in whole body vibration as well as hand-arm vibration. So first, whole body vibration is when it's transmitted to the whole body. It's usually when you're sitting on something or you're standing on a platform. So think of, maybe a forklift, and this diagram down here is a tugger. Even, some of the rails that go through the aisles of the greenway, the greenhouse that you will stand and you'll pick, but when you move, there is some vibration there. The issue with vibration is that long-term exposure can lead to different digestive problems. Back problems there's been a lot of literature and research with back problems as a result of whole body vibration. And it can also become difficult to do different types of precision tasks when exposed to high levels and over a long period of time of vibration. Hand-arm vibration is when it's transmitted through direct contact through the vibrating source. So in here you see the gentleman holding on to a rototiller. So holding on to that rototiller, the vibration is going to be sent through your hands. One of the common musculoskeletal or type of disorders that we see with hand-arm vibration is Raynaud's phenomenon, or you might hear it called as white finger. And that's just that whole inadequate blood flow to your fingers when you're exposed to long periods of time or high degrees of hand-arm vibration, whether it be through power tools. You can even get it through the use of steering wheel as well when you are exposed to whole body vibration. What's really important to understand is this synergy effect. Often, if you're exposed to one risk factor, more often than not, there's more than one at play. So when you think of even like if you have an awkward posture, you actually are going to have increased forces at those joints as well. So when there's this synergy effect, it compounds the level of risk. So it really is the susceptibility to developing some type of musculoskeletal disorder increases when you're subjected to multiple risk factors. And just know too that, and we'll talk about later when it comes to controlling some of these risk factors, if you were able to control something like an awkward posture and bring it down to something that's more neutral, inadvertently it's already going to attack that force, right? So if you can get into a neutral posture, the force also decreases. So sometimes by controlling one, you end up controlling more than the other, but just know that it definitely, each risk factor is this layer and layer of more, and it can compound to increase your risk of developing an MSD. When we look specifically in agriculture, some of the common issues we see is this idea of contact stress. So you saw this before with regards to the tool and the handles. So clippers are often used to, cut produce a lot, and it's important that you get clippers that fit your hand. A lot of these tools are not a one size fits all. They'll come in different sizes. You want tools, the handle of tools rather, to extend beyond the palm so they're not digging into your palm and reducing blood flow. The other thing here too would be gloves are often worn. When gloves are worn in the workforce too, it's important that, not everybody gets the same size glove. A female hand compared to a male hand are drastically different. So if you're wearing a glove that's too large, you end up actually gripping things a lot tighter because you lose that proprioception. And so you have to grip harder till you feel it in your hand. Conversely, if you wear a glove that's too small to even, try to open your hand, you're working against that force of that. And then the second diagram here is one of those rail carts that you see in greenhouses. And often what happens on these is that the workers will lean over the edge of them, as well as keeping their foot statically on a foot pedal as well. So those are two sources of contact stress when using that type of equipment. And also in packing and shipping, that happens a lot with greenhouse and produce, is always a source of concern. Whether it is it's the whole idea of manual material handling. So there's a lot of lifting, carrying, pushing, pulling. And when we go into these, different packing areas, we'll see stacks that are very high or large containers. And those can be ideas to control them, is to be a smaller container, or to, stack less so you're not reaching over shoulder. But there's a lot of different complexities that have gone into why are they using these containers? Why do they need to be stacked so high? I've been in some of these greenhouses that the reason why that they need to use those type of containers or stack that high is logistical. It's the way that the supplier wants them and the way that they fit in the truck that's transporting them. So there's a lot of different things that need to be taken into consideration when we're looking at these different jobs and what needs to be put together as far as, implementing controls that would work.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And so I'm just going to jump in here. And so now we wanted to kind of talk a little bit about what we know about MSDs among migrant agriculture workers a little bit more. So in terms of our experience, even back in the beginning of our program, when we were seeing these workers clinically, again, this was looked at as our occupational health physicians, or how occupational health physicians and nurses were seeing these workers as patients. MSD issues always ranked #1 in terms of the health issues that these workers were presenting with. So you can see the graph. Although the kind of total patient number wasn't super large, as is the case of some of the health centers that are now seeing these workers on a regular basis throughout the season, it was still significant for us to really see that there was a distinct experience of MSDs here. And through a review, we also recognized that many of the issues, including the MSD issues that we're seeing, were either directly or indirectly work-related. In addition, we in 2021 and 2022, we completed a project funded by the Ministry of Agriculture of Ontario. And this project was focused on understanding the mental health and psychosocial factors experienced by migrant or temporary foreign agriculture workers. However, we, as part of this project, we did extensive interviews of different stakeholders to try to understand a little bit about their work, but also what were the concerns or issues that they were seeing among these workers. So among those interviewed, we interviewed 7 health centers in Ontario that are delivering primary healthcare services to migrant agriculture workers. And here you have the list of the health centers that we interviewed. As part of these interviews, we asked all of these health centers to identify the common health issues that they were seeing among these workers. And all 7 health centers identified that MSDs were the most common health complaint they were seeing among these workers. So multiple health centers identified issues of back and shoulder pain, hand issues, as makes sense in terms of Melissa's and Andrew's presentation, including carpal tunnel and thumb pain, and some discussed seeing joint pain in the knees and neck. Multiple health centers identified these issues as being work-related, with mention of repetitive stress injuries. And we can share a link to the report where you can kind of really see some of the results of those interviews. In addition, through the work of our outreach workers, we have also identified cases where our outreach workers have supported workers in filing WSIB claims related to MSDs. Oftentimes, what this looks like is our outreach workers referring these migrant workers to legal clinics who can help them process WCB claims, but it definitely had been something that we started to look at and realize that many of these were MSD related. As such, we started kind of having these bi-weekly meetings between Melissa and Andrew and our teamwork project team members that focus again on Western Ontario, to try to really unpack this a little bit, because there was quite a few cases that were coming up with workers being concerned about muscle strain and various symptoms as well, that were reaching our outreach workers, and our outreach workers were trying to figure out how to direct them to support and information. And that again was really what led to the creation of our infographic. So also at play here was our identification of a bit of a resource gap in this space for specifically MSD related information and resources, and ergonomic resources for these workers in languages that were needed, and in more visual formats that often are needed by these workers as well. And that also, though, considered their experiences, that kind of really recognize some of their challenges, maybe navigating services or information, or maybe sometimes their hesitation to identify concerns that they're experiencing at the workplace level as well. We also were unable to find MSD prevention-related resources that not only included awareness and prevention information, but also information on what to do if workers were experiencing symptoms of MSD and where to get help. So that ends up being a very important component of resources for migrant agriculture workers, where you really want to connect people with where they can get help if it's needed. Again, just in case support or different networks of resources and supports are complex or not in their language. So really making sure that you're connecting them to somebody or an organization that can help is very essential. We also identified a bit of a misconception about ergonomics, and what to do in terms of MSD prevention and treatment, where we saw a lot of community groups and partners leading educational sessions for these workers, kind of titled ergonomics, but that ended up being solely focused on worker stretching versus looking at the workplace ergonomic hazards that Melissa and Andrew have mentioned. And totally understandable in terms of sometimes stretching feels like something that the workers could do themselves, but definitely it falls short in really trying to address what's going on and really causing the symptoms. And I don't know if Melissa and Andrew, you want to jump in and mention anything else about stretching, or kind of where that kind of is a bit limited in the bigger view, or.
Yeah, I think I think the focus of ergonomics and MSD prevention is trying to identify the factors that could contribute to MSDs in the workplace. So if we're able to identify any sort of equipment that's causing MSDs, or any task that people are doing over and over again, or anything that ties back to the risk factors that Melissa and I discussed earlier. Really, when we think about ergo, we're trying to identify those things to prevent injuries from occurring. Generally speaking, stretching and strength training, exercise programs can kind of control the risk. It can help slightly to avoid injury, but it's more of a kind of secondary defense. It shouldn't be thought of as a primary way of controlling MSDs.
But as we'll note, we definitely kind of recognize the component of warm up or things like that, and that's what resulted in us developing the secondary resource that we're also going to talk about too, which is the warm up cards. So in terms of then the development of our new infographic, really, obviously, we had a solid foundation in our OCAL ergonomists, like Melissa and Andrew, developing ergo informational resources. So on the OCAL website, you'll find a lot of ergo info fact sheets and tools that were already, being developed before our infographic. And again, that experience in the resource development was quite established among OCAL ergonomists. And then we also saw a great success in our new infographic design for migrant workers, specifically for migrant workers, which was our first go at it was in our OCAL heat stress infographic that you can see a bit of a picture here. So in working with some new OCAL designers, we really feel like we've struck a really good chord in terms of being able to display information in very visual ways, simplified ways that always end up being the format that workers really let us know that they appreciate. In addition to videos are also really identified by workers that they're interested in. But again, this success in infographics really also helped in the foundation of the creation of this MSD infographic. And then again, those bi-weekly meetings between our OCAL Teamwork Project outreach workers, who again are really connected to the communities that each represent the cultural communities of workers within the region. So they really were, the conversation, as we're going to get to, between our ergonomists and our outreach team was really just the core of just great common learning and the coming together of ergonomic experience and expertise with a solid understanding of these workers. So before I kind of open, we wanted to kind of hear from our outreach workers in terms of how they found that experience working with Andrew and Melissa. But I'd just like to say that, you know, we recorded some of these meetings and it just, for me, in my experience and work with OCAL, it just was really such a great experience listening in on these conversations again between Melissa and Andrew and our outreach teams, because it really, I think with health and safety, sometimes we, you know, could build walls between each other based on credentials or based on, you know, and even at the beginning in these conversations, people were a little bit shy, but really the breadth of experience that our outreach workers have in terms of understanding these communities coming together with this really resulted in just some great conversations and really contextualizing ergonomics in a solid understanding of how it's applied among this population. So I don't know if any of our outreach workers here want to jump in and add any of their experience or share any other experience. And feel free to unmute yourself.
Hi, yes. Hi, everybody. It's me, Aswani. Yes, and I can start with experience. I want just to say that for me, personal at the beginning was like amazing, and it was also a process of learning on my own side because ergonomics is very vast. So, and then that's when I also, like realize that how can you explain this to workers in a more simpler way? Also, we know creating misconception of the information. So, and yeah, because workers will come and a lot of them, they will think, like if I just, I have like a muscle ache, so if I can just bath myself in salt, that will help. Or things like that. So that's when I realized, we need more of this. And it was just very nice to have Andrew and Melissa with their knowledge and also providing that knowledge to us to also understand more this ergonomic information to create something that is more digestible for workers. And other part that I loved it was that is created on that, but also has parts of what they can do. How can we empower themselves to talk to their team, to their supervisor, to the employer when they feel like they are not like having enough rest or break between tasks. And in case that they are already having these situations, what they can also do. For me, this infographic has a lot of also, it has all the components in the part of what is musculoskeletal disorders, how they can be produced, and also like in the different ways, because it also says that affects like people in different ways, depends of their weight or if they have previous conditions, when sometimes the migrant workers already have previous conditions of other problems. And then what can they do to, to not like to empower themselves, and also responsibilities of employers. So it was in my experience was really good, and I think we have already, because we have done some workshops already on these infographics, and is receiving really good comments from workers. They are understanding more what is really musculoskeletal disorders and things like that. But now I'm gonna pass maybe the floor to other of my co-workers, outreach workers there, to share their experience.
I can share a few thoughts. By the way, I'm Kreja. So I'm also part of the Teamwork Project Outreach team. So I'm particular to the Filipino community. So I just wanted to thank Andrew and Melissa. They're so patient and considerate, because you will, in our team, you will be considering at least minimum of 4 cultural communities. And we have different experiences from all the workers that we're able to talk to. So those were considered. Even just changing words to more layman's terms, because of course they are experts in the field, and going back and forth with all these changes, not just the graphic designs, but even the wordings and the inputs from us. Our team really appreciate the patience that they allotted in finalizing all this infographic MSD. And then anyone from the team could jump in again to share their own experience.
I know we have Andrea and maybe, but no pressure, or Cassini. Okay, no worries. And if anybody else wants to jump in, you can also do so at the discussion too. But yeah, it honestly was just a great experience in terms of these meetings and these meetings to create the infographic. Any last minute comments on this part? I don't know, from Melissa and Andrew, and then we'll move on. Okay. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. Okay. So, all right. We'll then move on to the next part. So now we're going to review the infographic, and so you all have kind of copies of this, but we did want to kind of look at each section and try to describe them so you get a sense of what we focused on. So the front cover of the infographic, explains what musculoskeletal disorders are in a visual way. So, as mentioned, these are injuries or disorders of the joints, muscles, ligaments, tendons, the spinal discs, nerves. And then mentioning, that when these tissues are stressed on a regular basis without enough time to rest, they can become damaged and lead to MSDs. We then wanted a visual representation of the signs and symptoms, including things like swelling, pain, discomfort, stiffness, range of motion loss, inability to perform tasks and duties. And with the signs and symptoms, we talked a lot about how, obviously with agriculture work and the physicality of the work, that sometimes aches and pains can be part of the job, but we really felt that oftentimes some of the migrant worker communities normalize certain pains or injuries that last longer that should not be normalized and that should be kind of seen as, signs of MSD. So that was part of really trying to really discuss the signs and symptoms and be able to talk to workers about those. Then we have a visual representation of the risk factors that Melissa and Andrew reviewed with us today. That include, again, force, pressure, awkward posture, static postures, temperature, which is another one as well, vibration, lack of rest, and stress. So I think that we've touched on most of these, but is there anything else here that you want to mention, Melissa or Andrew?
No, I think that covers it all.
Okay. And then as Melissa mentioned, that many of these risk factors are related and any combination can increase the risk, right? So we kind of really wanted to also communicate that. And then so as Aswani mentioned, it was really important for us to kind of root this in terms of the employer responsibilities, or what we're hoping and what should and is happening in many greenhouses and farms. But again, looking at they're having a musculoskeletal disorder prevention program and training happening at the workplace, looking at proper tools and equipment to reduce stress and strain, the regular maintenance of tools and equipment, as mentioning in terms of things like maybe a rusty a clipper that could be creating more force and things like that, and the idea of job rotation to reduce exposure to the hazards. Also looking at hazard safety and emergency response information and training. So education to workers obviously is essential, and having that education to workers in their languages and in ways that they can understand obviously is key. Also then we wanted to talk about, what about workers that are already experiencing MSD symptoms? So the idea that at the workplace there should be, efforts to support and monitor and following up on workers' conditions, providing modified duties, alternative duties for injured workers, and additional breaks to give the injured body time to rest. We really wanted to also nail down the idea that there should be obviously a process to identify, prevent, and reduce risk factors, including those that develop that can lead to the development of MSDs, and that these processes should really include workers in a very proactive way, in a supportive way, and include obviously the health and safety representative, members of the Joint Health and Safety Committee that should be in place on the farm or greenhouse. Translation should be provided as much as possible so that all workers can contribute effectively, and that this process should be supported by management so that workers feel confident in participating in identifying issues that they're encountering and identifying hazards that could be leading to the symptoms, and then feel comfortable in doing so without any kind of fear of reprisal or anything like that. We then did want to then look at the idea of identifying the risk and then also looking at solutions. So this is kind of, I think, the race kind of part, I guess. I think, Melissa, you were going to maybe explain a little bit more.
Yeah, I'll jump in here. Just because I kind of alluded to it when I was talking about some of the risk factors with Andrew there, and that it's important to be able to identify the risk factors within your workplace. And the process of that is this whole idea of the acronym RACE. So recognizing a hazard or problem, and that could come from injury reports. It could just come from just sources of information that people have a genuine general concern about it. Joint health and safety walkthrough. But anyway, the hazard is recognized. And then what you have to do that if there's this hazard in the job causing a potential injury, you want to go assess that level of risk. And after the assessing of the level of risk is kind of where you dive into this hierarchy of controls. And the hierarchy of controls is kind of used as a guide. It shows you it's an inverted triangle, as you see there. And at the top, where there's the most effective control, is the idea of eliminating the hazard completely. So eliminating that process completely, so then nobody is subjected to that hazard, all the way down to the least effective, which would be personal protective equipment. It's important that, whatever control that you put in place, that you go back and you reevaluate it to make sure it's effective, because just as like this inverted triangle shows, least effective is as you work down. So you may put temporary controls in place just to kind of bridge the gap between maybe putting something that requires more tools and ordering of parts. You might have an administrative control, like Eduardo talked about, job rotation. Job rotation is going to reduce overall exposure, people's exposure to that risk factor, but it doesn't actually change it. So that might be a temporary control put in place that when you go reevaluate, you might be like, oh, we're still doing this, but we need to get back on, getting or ordering that tool. So it's just really important that these kind of work together, this idea of race and the hierarchy of controls.
It's great. Thank you so much. And that part might seem, complex, and it is. It took as in the conversation with our outreach workers and myself, we definitely asked a lot of questions. But I think what we wanted to do here is really, be able to start providing workers that are at various levels of maybe their engagement with health and safety, the wording, the tools to understand what again should be happening in terms of occupational health and safety. So in terms of the next little bar here in terms of action, if you're experiencing symptoms of MSD, this was a really important part for us as well in trying to provide information to workers that could be already experiencing these symptoms. So we definitely wanted to communicate, to talk to coworkers, talk to their health and safety representative or joint health and safety committee about their symptoms and maybe their concerns that it's work related or their work tasks are contributing to or causing these symptoms. We mentioned that if they are to seek medical attention, if they feel like they need to seek medical attention, to let the healthcare provider know that they think that these symptoms are caused by their work, and to ask more information about WSIB. So this is really important to kind of close the loop for potentially injured workers and getting them the support that they're needing. And we here included information about WSIB, their call center line that also identifies that they can connect workers with the translator in their language. And we also connected or included information here to the legal clinic IAVGO that has been for a long time identified as a legal clinic with a lot of experience supporting migrant workers and WSIB claims. So we have a whole round of resources focused on WSIB information with migrant workers. So the idea here is that we can also use those, which we have in video and wallet card forms, to also come hand in hand with this infographic as well. And I'm just kind of looking at the time, so I'll maybe go through the last few of these slides a little bit faster. So we, in thinking about that MSD infographic, we are really excited about it. We still did want to think about some practical, maybe activity-based activities, I guess, that we could do with workers to also be a bit more engaging and things like that. So we didn't want to lose completely the focus on the idea of maybe warm-ups. Again, not centralizing exercises at the core of this, but having them be, as Andrew mentioned, an addition that can still be of benefit for workers. So we developed these warm-up wallet cards. So again, the way that it's printed, and we've have a bunch now printed across our outreach teams, it folds into a small card that can be placed into into a bag where we are going to be distributing stretching bands for workers this coming season. So again, here we mentioned just always warm up your body before you start any kind of work. And Melissa and Andrew helped us identify 5 exercises that we were sharing. And then we did kind of mention here, these activities are designed to be completed by physically able, healthy workers in preparation for physical work. We did also include these statements here. Again, we wanted to close a circle on some issues. We mentioned WSIB again. If they feel like they have an injury, if they feel like they have an injury, please do not perform these exercises and consult somebody. And if they think that their injury is work related, to speak again to somebody at their workplace, their health and safety rep or committee or representative or supervisor. And then again, if they would like to then again to get more information about WSIB. So again, we didn't want to leave these components of the conversation out here either. And this is then what the exercise, the warm-up exercises look like. So they kind of range to try to do a full body warm-up. And again, we will be distributing, we have a limited amount, but these stretching bands that will be provided along with these cards as well. So in terms of just quickly how these resources can be used with and by agriculture workers or by their employers, the resources obviously can be distributed in print format. We can print them and deliver them to partner organizations, or you can print them yourselves as well. And the other thing is the stretching band right now is in a way that it's a tricky to print, so we're going to be figuring that out soon. And then the best way, even though we've really worked to try to make these as clear and accessible as possible, we find that for all of our resources, the best way is to present these to workers and guide them through the resource, not just hand out and expect the worker to necessarily navigate the resource independently. That also works for a lot of workers. Obviously, there's a lot of workers at different levels of literacy, and but we always like to explain it or present the resources to them. And that so our outreach workers are going to be presenting this information to workers this season, and we can also support other organizations in doing so. So we can organize kind of a train the trainer session type thing to have your teams or your agencies outreach workers understand maybe the best practices to present this information yourself or these resources yourself. And then again, we're going to be distributing stretching bands to workers as well this season. We did want to root this resource a little bit in terms of a discussion, that we never envision our resources in a vacuum, in the sense of like it's going to be effective just as a resource. It really has to be part of continued efforts to ensure that agriculture workplaces have effective health and safety programs that include migrant agriculture workers in the various aspects of them, that eliminate and control workplace hazards, including those that contribute to the development of MSDs. And then again, these resources, and that's why we make nod towards having workers, the translation and health and safety meetings, or and the empowerment of them, because again, they need to be part of ongoing efforts to empower migrant workers in their involvement in health and safety, and their identification of workplace hazards and hazard prevention in a climate that is supportive and that is free from fear of reprisals for these workers. And that's how we're really going to get the internal responsibility system, or workers really being part of this in a substantial way. In terms of then OCAL, we're here to help, and our ergonomists are available to then provide workplace-specific assessment recommendations and solutions. So we have numbers here that we can share after. We'll share this slide deck with everybody as well, but these are the contact numbers that you can get a hold of our particular ergonomists that are closest to you, and then they can kind of really do a more focused in support for the workplace, and they can do also educational presentations, and we've done quite a few. Our ergonomists in partnership with our outreach workers as well. And lastly, I just wanted to showcase our Where Does It Hurt body mapping workshops, because this is another way that we've been really learning a lot about what's going on in terms of aches and pains and muscle strains and all of that, and MSDs basically among migrant workers. So this is a really innovative workshop that we're really excited about. We've been doing it for about 2 years now in a very standardized way. We've been working on it for quite some time, but now in a standardized way about 2 years. So these are some photos from a workshop led by Daisy Rivendenera, our outreach worker in the Niagara region. And this was a presentation she did, this body mapping with a group of Mexican agriculture workers in Niagara. So here we invite workers to use different color stickers to kind of identify the places in their body where they feel aches and pains. Some of the other colored stickers also represent stress and other health issues, but we really focused on the red stickers and pain. So at the end, you know, it's a really engaging workshop because you have workers themselves putting where they're feeling things, and then it really inspires other workers to also participate, and then you at the end get a very visual representation of what's going on in the body of these workers. And as they're putting the stickers, we're also asking them to explain the type of work they're doing and whether they think that some of these symptoms or issues could be related to that work. And we're kind of rigorously taking notes or and things like that. So it really gives you then a map of what's going on among these agriculture workers in these regions. So here's another, we've done this in each of our outreach regions as well. And this season coming up, we are focused on doing these again. So we can collaborate. If any organization partner would like to host us, we can do this. And we can also do this at the workplace. And the eventual map can also be then a resource to management to really understand what's going on as well. And so that's it from us. And so we just wanted to open it up to questions or comments and any discussion. And at this point, I think we're going to stop the recording so that people feel okay in participating. Any questions or thoughts? Or any experience from any others in terms of MSDs that they've identified among, or that they've heard from workers or at the workplace, if there's any management representatives too?